First of all, thank you to all the participants for attending today. I'm Jennifer Smith with the Board of Advisors, and I'll be the event moderator today. We appreciate your interest in today's webinar titled Rethinking Sales, Reevaluating Your Team for Future Success. We're certain you'll find value in joining us today. This will be an interactive session with the opportunity to have all of your questions answered. If you will just add them into the chat box and send them to me, Jennifer Smith, in between the presentations, we will have time for specific questions. The two topics we will discuss today will be, first, the 5 steps to pick the winning sales team to deliver superior results. And that will be presented by Daniel Steyn, Fractional VP of Sales at Sales Xceleration. Daniel is an accomplished sales consultant and sales leadership professional with a proven track record of optimizing bottom line results on a global scale. He is the founder of Cornerstone Business Consultants, a sales effectiveness consulting firm that helps small and mid-sized businesses break through sales growth barriers. He combines his 20+ years of sales and leadership experience at large and small companies with Sales Xceleration's proven platform to build winning sales strategies, world-class sales processes, high-performance sales teams, and disciplined sales execution for his clients. The second topic to be covered today is optimizing your talent, productivity, and culture to build a high-performance organization using applied behavioral analytics. That will be presented by Bryan Smith, CEO and Executive Advisor at the Board of Advisors. Bryan works with CEOs, business owners, and other visionary leaders that believe their people are the #1 predictor of their company's future financial success. His clients experience challenges such as lack of employee engagement, low productivity, turnover, and finding and retaining top talent. Bryan works with them utilizing Culture Index, a data analytics program, to quickly identify and resolve the critical challenges keeping their companies from fully executing their strategic objectives. The result is exponential company growth, maximization of their bottom line, and improvement to overall culture and sustainability. Before we get started, I have a few notes. One, today's webinar will be recorded. Therefore, please make sure you're all on mute during the session to ensure the best audio experience for all participants. Again, as we go through the session today, please send me, Jennifer Smith, via the chat box, any questions that you have. In between the two presenters, there will be time to address those questions. Lastly, I'd like to let you know about 2 upcoming webinars which may be of interest. June 23rd, Working Capital, What If Your Bank Says No? And July 7th, How to Retool Your Sales and Marketing Strategy for Recovery. And you can register at those through the business website listed below, Cornerstone Business Consulting Webinars. Now let's get started. Daniel, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Jennifer. So folks, I wish you could have been there. Joe just learned that he has lost his largest customer. This customer contributed about 40% of his business, and Joe's business was in trouble as a result of that. Now, it wasn't a surprise to Joe that this customer contributed 40% of his business, or that he would have been in trouble if he lost this customer. However, Joe, as many other business owners, always hoped that this day would not come. And as we all know, hope is not a strategy. The topics that we're going to discuss with you today would have helped Joe to mitigate the risk of losing this customer. It would have also helped him to not only build in today's environment a surviving environment, but a thriving company. So my name is Daniel Steyn, and I'm going to talk about the first topic, about the 5 steps to build a high-performing team. If I ask you to pick between these 2 teams in a game against each other, who would you pick? Would you pick the Chiefs or would you pick the Raptors in who's going to win a game when they play each other? Anyone wants to take a stab at it?
Chiefs.
So the person that said Chiefs, what would you do if I say it's a basketball game? Right? And so that's exactly the situation. A lot of business owners do not ask the basic question of what's my game that I'm playing, where's the end goal that I want to achieve? As is the example here, is if you know the game you're going to play, you can pick the appropriate team. So the first topic that we want to talk about is beginning with the end in mind. If you have a business, like the example I gave earlier about Joe, where majority of your business or a big portion of your business is balancing on a single client, then that is a high risk environment. So should you identify that you need to mitigate the risk of that specific client, and over the next 5 years, you want to mitigate your risk by diversifying your customer base and growing your revenue in addition to your existing customers with others, you would have a very specific sales strategy that you apply. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't necessarily do other aspects of a strategy, but you're going to have very specific key indicators that you might want to drive. However, if you have maximized your product sales into existing customers with your existing product, and you identify that the way to grow is to bring in additional product items into the existing customer base, and in other words, diversify your product portfolio, it's a different approach that you might take. It is a well-known fact that salespeople take time to start selling new product. It's very easy for them to just sell what they used to. And so you might have a totally different strategy that you're going to apply, and with that, a different sales structure that you might want to implement to win new business with new product into new or existing customers. However, if the long-term goal for you as a business owner is to sell your company, you might decide that this is a strategic sell that you're going to do. In other words, you want to make sure that your customer base is stable. You do not want your revenue start dropping while you're busy negotiating the sales price of your customer, of your company rather. And so with that, you might decide that you rather want to bring a sales team in or have a sales team focus on some of your largest customers to maintain that customer base and not affect your potential revenue growth. Now, each of these 3 examples are just some of where you might want to be in the future. And as you can see, each of these different scenarios might be a different end game that you have in mind, and therefore a different approach that you would like to take in your strategy. A sales strategy is the number 1 step you have to implement, developing the right sales strategy. It is simple, but it's not necessarily always easy to indicate what are all the contributing factors that you might want to consider as you implement the strategy or develop the strategy for that matter. Now, if we go back to the analogy we had earlier about the different sales teams, if we have identified that the game that we're playing is NFL and the game that we have to play is for the Super Bowl, you have therefore selected the Chiefs and not the Raptors. Well, what would happen if you only have a team of quarterbacks and maybe one of the defenders, but you do not have any receivers in the team? How well would you do in your Super Bowl game? Or would you be able to just tell your quarterbacks, you have to just practice a little bit harder? Alternatively, what would happen if you don't have any support structures in place around that team to help them, such as the medical team, as an example? Yet again, as much as this makes sense, a lot of business owners do not think about the combination and the team structure that's in place. So the second item that's critical is having the right sales structure for the right time of your company's growth. We've all heard about inside sales versus outside sales. Which is the best? Well, the answer is it depends. It depends on where your company is in its growth stage. It depends on your customer base, and it depends on a number of other factors. As an example, in the COVID environment that we are in right now, a lot of outside sales teams might not be able to visit customers, either because they don't feel comfortable with seeing the customer, or the customers are not comfortable with seeing them. And so, like is the case with one of my clients, we had to transition the sales team to inside sales. Easier said than done. And as you'll see, that's not always possible to do. Alternatively, you might say, well, we do need outside sales teams, but are they going to be hunters or are they going to be farmers? In other words, are these folks that you're going to have that's going to go and bring new business in from new customers, or are they supposed to only make sure that you maximize your revenue from existing customers? Now, there's a lot of discussions about should it be hunters or farmers. Now, again, in this current environment, it is always easier to sell more to existing customers. In other words, sell more product and more items of the same products to existing customers than it is to new customers that do not yet know who you are, and therefore there's no trust in place yet. But again, you need to map out your growth as a company with a sales team that needs to be in place. Now, let's say you've decided between inside sales and outside sales, and you decided who's going to be hunters and farmers, and that structure is in place. The next item, like the medical team as part of the Superbowl team, a customer support individual might be the right thing depending on your growth stage for your company. As an example, if you, for instance, have 4 business development managers, instead of hiring a 5th business development manager, you might want to consider rather hiring a customer support individual that can take some of that overhead and back office functions off the hand of the salespeople, so they can spend most of their time selling, as opposed to 40 to 50% of their time dealing with some back office administration or the follow-up work that's necessary with clients. So again, mapping out the right sales structure for the team for the right growth stage of your company is critical. A lot of business owners are hesitant to replacing their sales team. However, a recent Sales Xceleration survey has indicated that almost 50% of businesses have already or still plan to lay off or put on furlough some of their sales teams. And so it becomes even more important than ever to have high-performing individuals that is going to deliver, depending on the smaller team that you have. There is, as the slide shows, a 67% variance in results between poor-performing sales individuals and high-performing individuals. So if you have a team of 5 salespeople, would you not rather want to have high-performing sales individuals? Now, the biggest challenge is we often see low-performing individuals not only having lower results, but they decrease the overall team performance. It costs a lot more time from the leaders to manage them, monitor them, and try and coach them. And as I said, we see high negative financial impact with low-performing individuals. On the flip side, a high-performing sales individual not only deliver high revenue based on his own accounts, but it increases the overall team performance. You get morale, and you get an increase in the overall productivity, and obviously more revenue. So the third item that is critical is to replace low-performing performers with high performers. It's not easy. It's uncomfortable to let go of individuals that's worked for your company for 20 years. But in a time like this, it's very important that you make that transition. The next item is give them what they need. When we speak to business owners, we often ask them, what's the number one thing a salesperson wants? And they say, they want money. That is actually not correct. That's the second highest item. The highest item is giving them clarity of task. What does success look like? For instance, this single item is the biggest contributor to turnover in companies. The salesperson thinks they know what success looks like. The business owner has a different opinion, or the manager has a different opinion. And because they don't always speak with each other and have that meaningful conversation, there is ongoing friction between them. And as a result, we see great salespeople leaving. With that, it's always good to put SMART goals in place: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So have that in place along with metrics, that is the metrics which are the stepping stone toward success. As an example, if you have an inside sales team and you want them to deliver a certain revenue target, a metric towards the result might be that they have to make 50 calls per day. For a business development manager, they might have to have a pipeline of a certain amount of revenue that can convert to the ultimate sales goal. So additional metrics are important. Giving them clarity on what's the sales processes that they have to follow, and mapping those into the CRM not only give the leaders the insight that they need on how what progress is made, but it makes it crystal clear for the sales team on how they are progressing to the goals and metrics that they are being kept accountable for. So the fourth item is giving a team clarity of task. It is a higher priority than giving them an incentive or a high commission team. With that, as I said, incent them for the proper behavior. The first of all is having a compensation or commission plan that can be exploited. And I want to underline exploited. Business owners quite often say, I don't want the sales team to abuse my commission plan. And my question is, if they abuse it in a way that maximizes your revenue, then it's not really abuse. And so with that, it's important to put a plan in place that if a salesperson looks at it and say, how are they going to maximize their commission out of it? It should be 100% aligned with what the company wants to achieve. If it doesn't, your commission plan is not properly developed. A good incentive plan also helps you to acquire better salespeople than what you typically deserve, or for that matter, can afford. As an example, if you have a business development manager that you can really only afford his base salary without sales, you can bring that individual on and you only have to pay the base, allowing you to only pay them commission on what revenue they bring in. Obviously after the initial few months of honeymoon that they're on. But it does give you the ability to bring in higher performing individuals. And the first thing I want to always say to salespeople or to owners is, if a person applies for a job as a BDM and they are not comfortable with having a lower base and a higher commission, then they are not really a seasoned sales individual. The third point is to determine the proper salary variable mix. As I mentioned, if you have an account manager, you might consider a 70 to 80% base salary while having a 20 to 30% variable. While if it is a business development manager, you want to go for something like 50-50 base versus commission. And if it's a more seasoned individual, or if the person has been with a company longer, you can decrease the base to something like 30 to 40% and have the rest on variable. 89% of high-performing salespeople have left their companies because they don't feel that they can maximize the earnings. It is also the then reason why they leave. If they cannot earn more money by delivering more because the commission structure is being capped, then believe me, a salesperson that knows how to sell is going to look for a position where they can be comfortable and where they can be making more money. So the fifth item we want to touch on today is develop the right compensation and commission plan to drive results. Incentives is the biggest tool that we have to drive behavior. And so having the right commission structure and compensation plan is critical to deliver those results. So in summary, the 5 steps that a business owner needs to consider is fairly simple. First of all, it starts with the strategy. Your strategy is your compass. It's your true north. It's the thing that everything else hinges on. By setting a specific sales strategy in place, it automatically defines the sales structure that you're going to have in the beginning and 4 or 5 years later. The sales structure develops the positions that you have to have. Then you need to make sure you have the right players. As I said, telling a quarterback to just practice a little harder so they can be a defender is not the right thing. You need the right people in the right seat. The next step is giving them clarity of task. So do they understand what success look like, and do you have an agreement on what that might be? And then the 5th item is the right incentive plan to deliver the right results. So with that, Jennifer, any questions?
Yes, Daniel, we do have a couple questions. One is, how frequently should I be revisiting my strategy?
That's a very good question. The strategy is not something that is like a quarterly plan that gets revisited. Your strategy is something that you typically put in place with a 3 to 5 year goal in mind. And typically that does not change. However, in situations like today with COVID, where a lot of things have changed, it's a good thing to revisit your strategy and say, a lot of aspects have changed, the market dynamics have changed. So as soon as the foundational aspects that you base your strategy has changed, then you need to revisit it. So first of all, you start with a 3 to 5 year strategy, but then you revisit it on a maybe as often as every 6 months to reevaluate if your guiding principles are still right. But you don't necessarily make major changes to it.
Okay. Another one was, on one of your slides, you mentioned a 67% variance between poor performers and top performers. The question was regarding where that data come from, and could you share that information?
Yeah, it's actually a statistic that we have found from Sales Xceleration, where we have seen the difference between the high performing and low performing individuals. So it's based on our own experience.
Okay. Another one was, how do I know when it's time to go from having outside sales people or reps to bringing those resources internally?
So in situations like today where we have a COVID environment, those decisions are going to be guided in a great extent by the market. So as an example, one of my clients had 5 business development outside sales clients. However, they are selling into an industry that's in the healthcare space. And as a result, they do not currently have access to the customer base. So we had to transition them. But it is a very painful transition to move those existing team members into inside sales because they lack the skills. It's not where they are right. It's not a right fit for them. So there is a friction that exists between what they has to do and what they are skilled and who they really are as individuals. Outside of situations like this, you're going to consider dynamics such as, if your business development manager is spending more time prospecting and qualifying customers than they are actually selling, then it's a good indicator that you want an inside sales support function that can make the high number of dials, can bring the leads in, qualify them, and hand it over to the business development manager that can actually engage with the customer and be responsible for the closing. Your business development team is typically a higher cost to the company, and having a slightly less expensive and a different profile individual that can make a high number of calls, it's the right financial decision to support a higher revenue growth.
Okay, and we've got one last one here. Should salespeople have their own business plan separate from the company business plan, and should they be in alignment?
No, they shouldn't have a different plan. In fact, this comes to that clarity of task conversation. If the salespeople understand how their numbers are contributing to the business, it gives them clarity of what they have to do to be successful. They understand how their daily actions are contributing to the top line. So where it might differ is the metrics that they are being held accountable for. So a business development manager is obviously going to be held accountable for new business that they close or for building the pipeline. A account manager might have to be held accountable for the protection and the reoccurring revenue from existing customers. So, but those two components, if I just use them, they contribute to each other and ultimately make up the total number for the company's revenue. But it's important that they see how their contribution is ultimately contributing to the top line revenue for the company.
Okay, thank you. That was all of your questions.
Thank you very much. So what I would like to do now, I'd like to hand over to Bryan. Bryan, floor is yours.
Hold on one second. Let's unmute.
There we go. I got the unmute. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Daniel, for the handoff. I really appreciate that. For the team, again, I'm Bryan Smith, and my company is the Board of Advisors. And throughout Daniel's first part of this presentation, you heard a couple of themes come through about high performance, right people, right seats, right fit. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. At the Board of Advisors, we believe that the capability and productivity of your people are your #1 predictor of future financial success. And given that, we're going to first take a look at some of the primary issues that CEOs face today and why, and then we'll discuss how organizations are utilizing cutting-edge behavioral analytics to address those issues and ultimately build high-performance organizations. So with that, we'll get started. Okay, the top issues facing CEOs today, the first is the inability to hire the right team member, right? The right high-performing team member. 95% of employers admit making hiring mistakes by recruiting the wrong people. The second is the lack of engagement of your current employees. The Gallup poll results show that nearly 70% of employees are disengaged at work. Worse yet, 20% are actively disengaged, meaning they're not working towards your goals and objectives. Unfortunately, these issues lead to the leadership teams having to overcompensate, oftentimes in the form of working 55, 60, even 70 hours a week, every week. This overcompensation can lead to higher stress, family issues, and even some severe health-related issues. So let's take a look at the reason why. Why are we in the position we're in? We're going to start with this vicious cycle. Starts with the traditional hiring or promotion process is only 14% effective in predicting job success. That leads to poor job fit, where studies indicate that on average, 46% of new employees will fail within the first 18 months. As they go through those challenges, we talked about that 70% of disengagement, but what does that really mean? 70% of disengagement equates to, for every $700,000, for every $1 million in payroll that you're paying today, $700,000 of that is being paid to disengaged employees. Very important impact to your business. And then that disengagement ultimately could lead to turnover. which estimates have the cost to the business at 400% of their current salary. So again, very impactful to the business. Worse yet, if someone who's highly disengaged or actively disengaged and they remain with the company, they ultimately promote potentially a toxic workplace. So in the end, the question really is there any business goal more important than breaking this vicious cycle? So we've seen this, you may have seen this quote before from Jim Collins. I really like this. The first job of leaders is to get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats. I really want to draw attention today to the right people and right seats, because that is very critical as we're looking to build these high performance teams. So the question it begs is, what data are we using to determine the right seat and the right people? So we're going to dive now a little bit into behavioral analytics, just define it very quickly. It's an advancement in business analytics, which reveals insights into the behaviors of people. And we've talked about right fit, job fit. So behavioral fit is placing a person into a role where their natural behavior traits closely align or fit with the targeted behavioral profile required for that role. And we're going to show you a little bit more as we go through the presentation. The program that we're going to really using as our baseline or basis today is Culture Index. I have used Culture Index in several C-suite positions with great success. And we're going to really review this on a very high level today. It's hard to get into very detailed statistics of psychometrics, but I'll do my best to keep it at high level and show you pictorially of how to use the data to build high performance teams. But this program essentially uses behavioral analytics data to assess the leading indicators of capability and productivity of our employees. We use it to build high performance teams, to make communicating and leading our teams easier, and ultimately to grow our revenue profit sustainably. And that goes back to making a profit, working in the business, but not working to the stressors of 60 and 70 hours a week. Within the Culture Index program, there are 3 assessments, which I'll show you. Each of them are less than 10 minutes to complete. What the program does is assess 7 work-related traits there in the blue box, and we won't go through those in detail. The Culture Index is a web-based, fully scalable portal online. And Culture Index ultimately is known in the marketplace for their high validity and accuracy of their data. Now, I mentioned those 3 assessments, and I'm going to walk through this a little slowly, just conceptually. The first assessment is targeted towards that seat. Okay, there's an assessment you go in and fill out, and you define the seat. You define the behavior set that's required to be successful in the role. And I will tell you, this is where most companies benefit right out of the gate from the program, because they are not defining the seat. We all know the term, right people, right seats, but we need to identify that target profile to define the seat. It's number 1, required behaviors. Number 2, the second assessment is the survey traits. It surveys who you are naturally. It surveys the person, okay? And then the third assessment is how the employee perceives they need to behave to be successful in their current role, and that's a measure of job fit. So now you can start seeing that we're honing in and getting data. This is one of the data outputs in the seat, to define the seat, to look at the person, and assess job fit. And we're going to go through an example of how we use these 3 assessments to tackle those 2 challenges that we noted that CEOs face in hiring the right people and also assessing disengagement. So let's first start with a hiring analysis using applied behavioral analytics. So as we mentioned, the first thing we do is we use an assessment that the output comes up, defines the seat in a particular pattern. Okay, so in this case, staying with the team or the sports team, the football team, we're looking for a quarterback. We want a quarterback playing football, not this quarterback playing golf like maybe some of you saw over the weekend. So we're looking for a quarterback. That's the skill set we need to be successful. We survey people, internally and externally. It's done very quickly, very simply. Again, this is just a couple-minute assessment that they take, and we define in this particular scenario, you know what, we have found our right person. So we have the right person for the right seat, and that is an assessment or predictability of high capability in a role, okay? Consequently, what we often see is we define that same seat, and as we're surveying folks, what happens is we come back with a different pattern, a different behavior set. Now that pattern happens to be a phenomenal athlete in the same sport, but not the right fit. It's the wrong person. We're looking for someone to play quarterback, offense, not play defense. So phenomenal athlete, wrong person for the fit, for the particular job. And this is, again, assessment of a low capability. So we can see graphically very quickly in the program how we can mobilize this data to be successful. So we're trying to build our team around predictability. So the question we ask oftentimes is, what is low capability? What is that 70% today of disengagement? Where does it start? And you can see it starts in the hiring process. Adding assessments to your hiring process increases the predictability of job success from that 14% we saw a couple slides ago to 75% on average. That's pretty significant. Again, all we're trying to do is increase the probability and predictability of success on an individual level. So now let's switch over and see how we use the assessment to address employee engagement. Okay. The first is, again, let's say we would come in and we would survey a current team today to understand who they are. Let's say one particular individual happens to be a quarterback again. Okay. So we survey the people, and then we compare who the person is naturally to how they perceive they have to behave in a role. And again, in this case, this is the ideal. This is what we're looking for. We're matching survey traits to job behaviors, and this gives us an assessment or indication on productivity and also engagement. This person is set up for high productivity to do their job. Consequently, we look at the person, a different person on our team. And again, this person is a phenomenal athlete, plays football, same sport, phenomenal athlete, but sees his role, instead of playing defense, that he needs to play offense. And we see this quite often. Again, this is an assessment of low productivity, but absolutely low engagement over time. And again, leading to, over time, if we're asked to be someone that we're not, that leads to stress, burnout, and turnover, that vicious cycle that we reviewed. So we ask, what is that low productivity costing you? And again, this data is highly accurate. It's available in literally in a matter of moments or minutes after the assessment is complete. Can we start comparing and contrasting to evaluate the level of performance of our teams? So now let's bring it in back to sales profiles specifically. There's multiple sales profiles out there. There's customer service profiles. There are relationship-based sales profiles. And there's solutions-based sales profiles. Again, these are not only the seats that we are looking to define, but also the particular pattern set in an individual. And when they match, we have high capability and a predictability of higher capability and higher productivity. Okay. I'm going to give an example just to kind of bring this data home a little bit. I'll use it in an insurance office, insurance agency as an example. Originally, when insurance agencies came out, they did primarily home and auto, right? Home and auto policies are governed by the government and your mortgage, right? You're required to have home and auto if you have a home and a vehicle in insurance. And back in the day, it required skill set that was more of on the line of order taking skills, right? Servicing, high levels of service, order taking for the different types of home and auto policies that you may need. And then the insurance agency evolved. The marketplace and the dynamics changed. And they started adding life insurance policies, okay, which requires a different behavior set. We see that skill being in life insurance policy, being able to paint a picture of what life would look like or not without life insurance. What would it look like? What would that picture look like for your loved ones? So it required a different level of behavior set. And then lastly, just within the last several years, insurance agents are now being asked to sell financial instruments. And that requirement particularly is to be more solutions-based. They're talking about wealth management, your retirement, et cetera. So it is really to kind of bring all of this home, and is really critical to make sure we understand, as Daniel was mentioning, right person, right fit, right seat. We have to critically understand what we're looking for, then allow the advanced statistics to take over to go find that person. We do that on an individualized basis. We do that for each one of our team members, and we do that for the team collectively. And that's how we build high performance organizations. With that, again, really want to ask, what data are you using today to give you a high confidence level that you have each person in the right seat and the right person in the right seat? And I love this, is once you've filled your bus with the right people in the right seats, it becomes really less of a question of where you're headed and instead how far you can go. So again, that was just a high level overview. I wanted to share it pictorially without getting into a bunch of the data, but the statistics out there today are the big business statistics, behavioral analytics, psychometrics are available on a wide scale, and the ability to mobilize this within organizations is becoming more and more simple to utilize. Those that utilize it are in a competitive advantage versus those that don't. Any questions?
Thank you, Bryan. Yes, we do have a couple questions. One is, you mentioned defining required behaviors for a role, and you showed several different profiles for sales, different sales types. Are there standard profiles for different job types?
That's a great question. And there are some standards as I had shown, some directionally correct, but here's what we do. And one of the things that I really enjoyed when I was a client of Culture Index is that the first assessment that goes in and defines the target, it actually looks at your specific company and your specific role. Because a sales role, inside sales at one company might be different from an inside sales at another company. So what we do is we utilize that job required, that first assessment, to really dive into what your specific needs are. So we have directionally correct profiles that we know, but ultimately the most important thing is what works best at your individual organization.
Thank you. On the heels of that one, what types of industries can this program be used for, or behavioral analytics in general be used for?
Well, we use this in every industry. People often ask me, what does it work best for? I say, for any company that has employees. Because at the end of the day, the concept here is a formula that I use quite often was the productivity, the well-being, and the culture of my people are the leading indicators driving top-line growth and bottom-line performance. So any industry that has people, especially now in COVID, where the paradigm's changing, it is very, very important to understand, as the seats might be changing a little bit. How are you assessing the seat change during COVID?
Okay. The next one is the use of behavioral analytics just for sales teams, or can it be used throughout an organization?
No, it is typically starts with the tip of the spear, I call it, with the sales organization, because you know what, growth in sales, buys you some time to get the balance of the organization performing in a high performance mode. But no, absolutely, this behavioral analytics should be used at every level within any organization.
Okay. You mentioned something about COVID earlier. Is COVID impacting how behavioral analytics is being used or could be used at companies?
Yeah, absolutely. We see right now two things. We're seeing two ends of the spectrum. Number one, we're seeing companies that are actually growing through the roof. I hope everybody acknowledges that this is the first time in 13 years that it's been an employer's market for talent. Not only is there what I think 30 or 33 million people out there in, potentially looking for an opportunity. There's a ton of talent where just a couple of months ago, there was a huge war on talent. So we're seeing companies grow and they want to come out of this COVID bigger, stronger, faster. And how they're doing that is really looking at utilizing the program from that hiring assessment phase. So we're working with dialing in the expectations required for the seat. And then we're just out there filling surveys to identify top talent. Now, I also see the other side of that where companies are two-staged approach. One, they're just trying to remain viable. And to do that, they're having to make very difficult people decisions on maybe who to furlough and who to retain in the short term so they can remain viable to get to that next step to come out bigger, stronger, and faster. So what they're doing is they're utilizing behavioral analytics to help them make those people decisions on capability and productivity. So very, very good question.
Okay, hold on one second here. Those are all the questions that I have, Bryan. If you want to move to the next slide. Obviously, we would love to thank everyone for their participation today. We will be sending out a survey to gather feedback. So please, if you can provide any feedback, that would be wonderful. And then also, we do want to point out that both Daniel and Bryan have a couple complimentary offers for anyone on this call, or if there's anyone that you feel could get value from learning more a little bit about the successful sales side or high performance organization side. There are a couple offers that you can see up here in terms of different assessments that are being offered. Hold on, I think we also got one more last question, and we can open it up to additional questions as well. Let me see here. Okay, a question came in, Bryan, I think this falls for you. If someone falls partway in between the right fit and not the right fit, is it better to train them or pass on them for someone else?
Very good question. I see that quite often. I'm going to answer it in this way first, is that I oftentimes see companies trying to train up or coach up individuals for traits. And that's pretty challenging. That's very costly, very expensive. So what we do is we work with our clients to identify what are the most critical traits for the role, and then assess with additional coaching, can we improve the productivity of that individual? But when you look at the particular traits, that is actually going to help you determine whether or not to make that investment, or maybe is it better to take that individual, put them in a different role within the organization, and bring someone on either within the corporation or outside the corporation that's a better fit. So to answer that, what we want to do is we want the right traits and we want to coach them up. That's how we get maximum productivity, maximum performance.
Bryan, if I may add to that, I think there's something that a lot of business owners think about is, well, what about industry experience? So is it easier to train someone on my industry, or is it easier to train someone for the skills gaps? And I always say that it's a lot easier to learn a new industry and a product than it is to learn to become something that you are not. Now that might be, in this case, a salesperson, for one, just being able to sell versus not is a big challenge. Second to that is, are they really in the right seat within sales? I've hired salespeople, and within a few months, they are outperforming every other salesperson that's in the company because we hired the right person for the right seat. And to start off with, that individual does not have the industry experience. So learning to sell and to do it the right way, to be in the right seat, is next to impossible, right? The people that are able to do it are, as Bryan said, it's a internal resistance between who they are and what they have to be, and that quite often is causing a lower productivity, and the capability side of it is a difficult aspect. So I would always say, take the plunge. There are too many other people in the company that depends on the sales team being effective. Owners sometimes say, but I don't want to replace this individual. What about his or her family? And my question is, what about the family members of every other employee in the company that depends on the sales team being effective? So rather replace ineffective salespeople or people that are not the fit, and bring new people up in your product and technology and industry. It's a lot easier of a transition.
I think that was it, unless there are any other questions that anyone has or comments. Again, thank you all for your time today. We appreciate it. As we mentioned, you will get a survey